We are all familiar with the standard idea of a hero, one of those characters who must grow throughout a story, eventually defeating the villain and finally living happily ever after. However, this idea of a hero is faulty in its very essence. Why? Well, to answer this question in the simplest way, I'd say it's because the story never feels real. But what do I mean by real? Well, before I answer this question, let's go back in time a little bit. Our protagonist, Hideo Suzuki, is a middle-aged mangaka assistant who feels trapped in his life. We're introduced to him through his eccentric actions that make very little sense, like his dance when he enters his home, his weird expressions, his monologues, and even the horrors that he witnesses at night. But these are just everyday occurrences. We are thrust into the life of a seemingly antisocial person with few life goals and not so few problems. We are introduced to people in his life, such as the pervert Mitani-san, who always sexually harasses his co-worker, his girlfriend Teko, who is at times emotionally abusive through a constant comparison of Hideo to her ex, his editor, who keeps rejecting his manga proposals regardless of how much Hideo keeps trying to remake them, and even the rich groper, yet a fan of Hideo's work, Nakata. We witness Hideo's interactions with these people, yet at the same time our point of view feels distanced, as if we are observing life through a veil. We witness a person who is seemingly secondary in his own life, drawn more to be a piece of the world rather than a main character. Reading the first volume of this manga provides an oddly realistic view of the life of someone who has seemingly failed in every aspect, socially, romantically, and even professionally. As this continues, we witness more and more interactions, slowly learning about Hideo and the people around him through our observations. But at the same time, it feels like everything we see is heavily influenced by his perspective. We learn that everything we see cannot be trusted. Illusions and reality mix into one, and you can never trust the perspective that's shown. Even the slow downturn of society as the zombie outbreak begins is simply background noise. Even with the signs present, they are either hushed out by the mundane life of our protagonist, or could possibly be illusions. Well, until the very last chapter of Volume 1. Your first reaction to reading this might be the same as mine, that Hideo is a loser. And honestly, you're not wrong. He is stuck in his ways, refusing to change yet expecting good things to come to him. By all accounts, he has given up on trying to better his life. Honestly, if anybody else wrote this, I'd tell you to drop the story right here, as that wouldn't be worth reading. But you see, this manga is written by Hanazawa Kengo, a man who is a prolific manga artist, creating works such as Boys on the Run and Under Ninja, which got adaptations in 2010 and 2023 respectively. Even the story on its own has a live-action adaptation. However, even with this prowess, he retains absolutely zero internet presence. I mean, when I tell you that I needed to search for hours for any semblance of information on this man, I wouldn't be lying. Wikipedia? Nothing. Twitter hasn't been updated in years. Instagram? It kinda scares me, not gonna lie. Like, there's only food in his weightlifting routine, so I think that's him? You see, after putting all my effort into finding information on this man, I was able to come up with only a few points and explanations about his history as a mangaka. He was born on January 5th, 1974 in Hachinohe in the Aomori Prefecture. At first, he worked as an assistant to Osamu Oto, known for his works such as Kasai no Hito. He later also worked with Yamamoto Hideo, the artist behind Ichi the Killer and Homunculus. He mentions that he took large inspiration from the two, specifically Yamamoto, that inspired him to undertake his own research before starting his own projects. Before and after his first work, which was Resentiment, he stayed with him for quite some time. Also, while doing research, I decided to just read Resentiment just for the hell of it, and I have no words. I mean, it was just genuinely hard to read. Like, you have this middle-aged mess of a man who just wants an age-ambiguous girl to show him her punani. I wanted to finish it, but there's just not much I can do. I can't do it. I couldn't. I'm sorry. However, I digress. You see, Hanazawa's inspiration from Yamamoto is especially prevalent in this manga. I mean, the scenes are just beautiful. He says he would take trips to different locations and take inspirations from these locations for his environment, usually taking up to 3,000 to 4,000 photos, and then only picking the ones that he liked from those. Actually, you might have noticed this, but both Kengo and Hideo actually look the same, and that's because they are the same. Kengo drew Hideo in his image, and when he was asked, how do you choose the characters that you create, Kengo responded by saying, I use what I have around me. My characters sometimes reflect those close to me, and to get as close as possible to the sought-after realism, the best example I had on hand was me. I gave my features to Hideo, and he's a mangaka. In another interview, when he was asked a similar question, he responded with the addition of relating his personal experiences to Hideo's. If I hadn't been able to draw him, I think I would have been a failure. I've always believed I was useless. To put this into perspective, I want you to understand that this man goes out of his way to write a person that can only be categorized as a loser. And man, is he good at it. Like, Hanazawa is the expert on making you like a character that you otherwise would deem as a waste of space. I mean, he writes his characters with faults to the extent that you can't help but to see them with people. This is why Hideo seems to be the way that he is. A loser. So in this case, this isn't a story about a zombie apocalypse, as many would tell you. I mean, in fact, Hanazawa himself stated that. There's nothing special about a zombie. In that sense, the zombie only plays a secondary role as such. I only recently realized this, because the main character is so closely related to me. If I were to think that I wasn't the main character in my own story, he couldn't be either. And if you look at the story from this context, it all makes sense. Hideo, from his very first interaction that we have with him, lives an empty life. He and the people around him, and even the way that he is portrayed in the manga, initially show that Hideo is almost like a secondary character in his own life. And just as things are slowly looking up for him, the apocalypse starts. Now, this is where the story really begins. So from now on, there will be major spoilers as I progress, so feel free to click off at any time. As you read the story, the idea of a hero is increasingly prevalent. I mean, the entire story is called I Am a Hero. You might initially believe that the title reflects the direction of the story, that Hideo is going to be on a long journey to become a hero of this world. However, you aren't necessarily right. You see, you are right in thinking that the story is about Hideo's growth and eventual surpassing of his own self. However, you would be wrong to think that the idea of a hero is used in the literal sense here. I believe that a hero is an ideal that is idealized to such an extent that it becomes realistically unachievable. And ironically enough, Hideo's name literally means hero. Hide, meaning excellent or fine, coupled together with O, meaning hero or manly. However, you can quickly gather that Hideo is very far removed from this title, and I honestly believe that he knows this as well. Early on, we see him saying to himself, I am a hero. But those aren't words of confidence, rather they are words of affirmation, as if Hideo wants to be a hero. If you look at this a little closer, those words are only ever said when Hideo seems to be at his lowest, seemingly whenever he feels that he isn't strong enough to defend against whatever it is that he is battling. Those words give him courage, but at the same time, the more Hideo grows, the less we hear those words. Little things like this show Hideo's growth throughout the story. We watch a man who initially couldn't hold himself together, who needed to always rely on others for both affirmation and direction, turn into someone who would selflessly throw himself at a horde of zombies for the sake of survival. It's almost ironic that the less Hideo focused on becoming a hero, the more he became one. However, what truly stands out to me amongst the growth that Hideo experiences is that it isn't linear. If you were to pull up most heroic stories, you could definitely pinpoint 1 or 2 points at which the main character would question themselves in the pursuit of their goal. However, in Hideo's story, there are constant ups and downs, generally the downs being much more frequent. It is usually only when someone else besides Hideo himself pushes him to go forward does he actually tend to take the first step. And we see this in multiple parts throughout his journey. His meetings with Hiromi, Araki, and Oda are probably the most notable mentions. In each interaction, he is always relying on them for some extent, usually battling some sort of fear or problem that they eventually will allow him to overcome. These interactions and eventual growth are what allow Hideo's character to transcend from a secondary character to a protagonist in this world, and it also becomes evident through Hideo's position in the party as the story goes on. He goes from a passive role to a leadership role by the end of the story, and you're with him through each and every step. You witness his mistakes, his fears, his gambles, and his determination to change. As you follow him through these moments, you can't help but to feel attached to this character, as you've seen him grow and learn. And this is why the story is so much more than your typical coming-of-age hero story, because even if the world in which these characters live in is fake, you can't help but to acknowledge that every single one of them seems to be real. And that moves me to my next point. We are introduced to many characters throughout this story, and every one of them is important in some capacity, but what's interesting is that these characters are separated into two distinct groups, that of which will never really meet. As such, we are given two separate stories, separated by time and place, but they are ultimately connected. The two groups that we are introduced to are mainly Hideo's group, which includes Oda and Hiromi, as well as others like Araki. On the other hand, there is also the Kurusu group, and everyone that's involved with them. By introducing these two groups, we are shown a variety of personalities, and we are also introduced to the plethora of interesting characters. However, one of the main driving questions for myself and many others was, why are the majority of survivors seemingly the worst of the worst? Every character that we are introduced to has some sort of imperfection. If you were to look at them from a moral standpoint, you could even say that every single character in this story has a large moral dilemma, a dark past if you will. Some feeding into their depravity, killing and pillaging, while others seem to change their ways and try to live to the best of their abilities through a new lease on life. It's interesting because, in a sense, morally correct people have no sense in this post-apocalyptic world. The people that seem to survive the best seem to be either egotistical narcissists or social outcasts. And this also was not by mistake. When Hanazawa was asked about this, he responded by saying, when you're a part of that group, or when you're a loser, you can only survive by fleeing reality. And in the event of a crisis, these people are astonishingly strong because they are used to being cold-blooded by fleeing reality. You can see that these characters aren't written to be weird, but are rather weird because they never really fit in the first place. And this is precisely why I love Hanazawa and his character writing ability. His characters are flawed to the extent that it makes them seem real. There's trauma, insecurity, and even a bit of insanity in these characters that he creates. The frustration that you feel reading certain scenes or trying to follow the logic of people who are either depraved or morally ambiguous just shows that he managed to convey the characters that well. More so, it doesn't end just there. When you take into account that there are two different groups that we are presented with throughout the story, two people specifically stand out. These characters are obviously Hideo and Nakata. A character that was introduced briefly in the first volume, and for those that didn't catch it like me, was actually the ex of Hideo's girlfriend that was the cause of the friction in their relationship. But that's besides the point. Nakata is the polar opposite of Hideo. Someone rich, not afraid to voice their opinion regardless of the situation, is talented in writing manga, and even if it's morally wrong, he's not afraid to live up to his desires. In contrast, Hideo seems to come up short in every single department, often being compared to Nakata in the first volume. Though it's almost ironic that when everybody seems to hold no hope for Hideo, the person with everything that he could want seems to idolize his work. The only person in the entire story who unconditionally admires Hideo's work until the end is Nakata, who seems to have everything that Hideo lacks. And it's this exact juxtaposition of their stories that ultimately takes the cake for me. I could of course talk about Hiromi and Oda, who are undoubtedly important characters in the story, but funnily enough, I think that the character that shows Hideo's growth most is Nakata. Not because he pushes him, but rather because he shows everything that Hideo isn't. They don't meet until the very end of the story, and even then, their meeting can't be called a normal one. Hideo shoots Nakata, only for him to be saved by the manga written by Hideo himself. They are split by a vast distance, and even the ending for each of them is opposite. Nakata manages to save his party and successfully escape to paradise, while Hideo falls into the abyss that is the now ruined city of Tokyo, and loses all those that he holds dear. The irony that is shown by comparing these characters is that there's no way that you could ever call Hideo a hero. By all intents and purposes, Nakata seems to be the hero that Hideo was supposed to be. It's specifically for this reason that I think Nakata is the most important character in the story. He provides the reader with an alternative reality of what could have been had Hideo been the so-called protagonist of the story. It makes the impact of the ending of Hideo's journey just that much more shocking. We are shown that no matter how much we want Hideo to be the victor or the hero of this world, that such a reality will never come about. But in reality, that was the purpose of the story. It wasn't some grandiose overcoming of trials to achieve a happily ever after. That was Nakata's story. Hideo's story was the prime example of what I like to call the hero paradox. The more you learn about the story, the more you probably question the validity of calling Hideo a hero. I mean, if you consider the most basic, non-philosophical description of a hero that I totally didn't look up, then it would be a person who is admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. But does Hideo uphold even one of these qualities? Well, no. It's really as simple as that. He doesn't. He isn't a hero in the people's eyes. Frankly, he barely even saved people if it weren't for him being lucky. I mean, the man also slept with a 16-year-old girlfriend after his supposed girlfriend got bit by a zombie baby. However, I would still call him a hero. I mean, if anything, Hideo's story still resembles that of someone who is a hero. He grew, he got stronger, he faced new challenges, and he was able to overcome them. However, he still lost. He saved the people around him just for them to die, and ended up all alone. He is by far the most unreliable narrator in the story. He's childish and even questionable in his morality. I mean, if we really wanted to see an actual heroic tale, I'd probably prefer to read the story of Nakato's survival. But I want you to think back a little bit on what I said at the very beginning of this video. You might initially believe that the title reflects the direction of the story, that Hideo is going to be on a long journey to become a hero of this world. However, you aren't necessarily right. From the very beginning, this was never intended to be the story of some small-time, unsuccessful mangaka becoming a hero who managed to save all his friends. If anything, Hanazawa took inspiration from a similar title called I Am Legend. From the very start, he planned to leave Hideo all alone. But why? Well, I want you to think about it like this. This is the story of a loser who did not want to escape his miserable existence. A loser who did not have the passion to change his ways. However, regardless of all that, he still managed to change. He fought, he fell in love, and he grew to be more responsible, and he grew enough to move forward. This is the story of Suzuki Hideo, his failures and his growth. Hideo isn't a hero because he managed to save the world. No, not even close. He's a hero because he managed to save himself. After spending some time reading many different interpretations of the ending, I can understand why many were dissatisfied with it. I mean, many blame the death of Hanazawa's father for making the ending so quick and almost abrupt after the climax, but in my eyes, this ending was the ending that best fit Hideo. I mean, let's say that he somehow managed to escape with Nakata. Would Hideo's story reach a conclusion? I really don't think so. If anything, he would grow increasingly reliant on others and continue his past life of stagnation. So in this sense, for Hideo to end up all alone was probably the only ending in which Hideo would be able to outgrow his past self. The more I think about it, the more I feel like Hideo is a great example of the imperfect hero. His faults and childish qualities make him human, and therefore make him real. I think it's undeniable that he feels like a human. Sure, you don't have to like him. He isn't a great person, nor is he someone that has greatly changed the life of others. I mean, the idea that a hero has to be an unachievable standard undermines the possibility for others to become heroes of their own worlds. That's why I believe that a real story about a hero is one about someone with so many faults that it might seem dumb to like them, but it's also what makes them the most relatable. You don't always have to like the protagonist of a story in order to learn a lesson. The heroic tale isn't always one of conquest or living happily ever after. In my eyes, what makes a real hero is someone who is able to move forward and constantly strive for another day, and that's why I love this story, because it doesn't end with the end, but rather, this is just the beginning. Hi everyone, it's been a while. I am talking to you as I'm just about to finish editing this video. So it's been a solid 6 months since I started working on this, and I've finally come to finish it. You know, there's been a mix of both school, life, and many other things getting in the way, but I finally finished it. So I hope that you liked what you saw, and I hope you expect more. And once again, I am sorry for taking so long, but I honestly don't think anybody's surprised by my lack of attendance for so long. Anyways, thank you everyone for watching, thank you everyone for waiting, and if you got to this point of the video, then once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you watching this entire video, and you can expect more to come. I definitely will be working on better videos, better edited. This one was definitely subpar to what I wanted it to be, but nonetheless, thank you very much everyone for watching, and yeah, bye-bye.